Well, hi everybody, and welcome to our Church360 Ledger Entering Transactions webinar. My name is Anna Johnson, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. It's right now 1 o'clock, so we're going to get started right here on time. Just going to get my PowerPoint going, and then we'll get right into it. Again, I'm Anna Johnson. I'm the marketing manager here at Concordia Technology Solutions. My name and my phone number, email, contact info are up there on the screen. If you want to contact me at any time, please go ahead and do that. We're always available to help. You can also call our support team at any time if you have any questions on Church360 Ledger. They're always happy to help with whatever you have. Just a little housekeeping outline for today's webinar. This is a 30-minute webinar, so it's a little bit shorter than some of our other webinars. So we'll have 25 minutes for my presentation. We'll just go through a few brief definitions for transactions in Ledger and then get into the software. We'll also have 5 minutes for questions. And you're always allowed to ask questions throughout. So if you think of something and you don't want to forget it, just put it there in the chat box in our webinar and we'll get back to you as soon as we can, probably at the end of the webinar. And one more thing, our recording will be shared. We put our recordings on our CTS YouTube channel, and we'll also put it on our product blog for Church360 Ledger. We're trying to update at least the recordings on a weekly basis there for you to find. Outline for our training today. The first thing we'll go through is just some basic transaction definitions and conventions for Church360 Ledger. Depending on your accounting background, you might be familiar with some of these terms, you might not, or if you're coming from a different software, different softwares might call different functions different things. So we'll go through that very quickly. We'll go through our debits and credits chart, which is definitely helpful, I know, for a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues here, especially when making journal entries if you're trying to figure out how your transactions balance in Church360 Ledger. We'll go through all different transaction types in Ledger. So there's 5 main transaction types. There's deposits, transfers, checks and check printing, payments, and journal entries. So those 5 are the main 5 things we'll be going through today, but we also know that there's some special transaction types in Church360 Ledger. So we have imported transactions, which includes imported transactions from Church360 Members. There's also recurring transactions and voided transactions, which are really different permutations of those 5 main types of transactions, and also copied transactions if we get around to it to have time. Again, if there's any time at the end, we'll go through questions and answers. So just a little bit about our main transaction types in Ledger, just so you know when to use which one, because I know sometimes it can be confusing. It was a little confusing for me when I first started in Ledger because I didn't know when to use a check versus a payment or a deposit or a journal entry. So here's the different types in Church360 Ledger. We have deposits, which are used to record money that comes into the church, pretty basic. There's transfers that allow you to transfer money between similar account types. So asset to asset accounts, income to income, or expense to expense accounts. There's payments. These are different from checks, and I'll just put both of those up there at once. So payments are used to record online and electronic payments, whereas checks are used for printing paper checks or recording handwritten checks. So if you're ever debating, do I use a payment or a check here, a good rule of thumb is it something I would use a paper check for or not, and then make your decision accordingly. We also have journal entries, which are used for account balance, corrections, interest, payments, and bank fees. If you're a kind of a seasoned accountant or a church treasurer, you'll be really familiar with journal entries. If you're not, that's okay too. Ledger often does a lot of those calculations behind the scenes, making journal entries for you if you ever edit a transaction. So that's available for you if and when you need it. If you don't, those other 4 types of transactions should cover it in Church360 Ledger. I know people are coming in and out. We started right at 1 o'clock. If you came a little bit later, if you just want to let me know if you can hear me and see my screen, I want to make sure everybody's on board with us here. Our second page of conventions for Ledger are just some basic rules that we have when working with Ledger. So every transaction must have a date, which I think is pretty makes sense to us all. All transactions have a memo option. So you don't have to have a memo in a transaction, but you always have that option, whether it's a check, payment, deposit, transfer, or journal entry. Every transaction must have a minimum of 2 line items. So we use double entry bookkeeping and ledger, so your credits and debits always have to balance for you. And if you're not really familiar with that kind of verbiage or that terms, that's okay. Ledger will do those calculations for you, and once you get in the software, you'll see that if it doesn't have 2 line items, or if the line items don't balance, that Ledger will let you know and you'll be able to figure it out from there. And like I said, debits and credits must balance. Those 3 starred items, again, are items that Ledger will give you a notification message if you don't have them, and it won't let you save a transaction without it being through. So if you've been to any of our other overview webinars, we often say, like, we prevent the well-intentioned from making mistakes, and that's what this really is. We want you to make sure that whatever you're putting in, it goes through just how you want it. I'm going to breeze through this debits and credits chart. I know a lot of my colleagues have found it helpful, and this just shows the way the debits and credits balance when Ledger is doing the math behind the scenes. So I'll just leave that up there for a minute. If you want to see this later, I can email you my PowerPoint slides too. But since we only have about 25 minutes left today, I want to get started right in the software. So if you give me just a second, I'm going to transfer over from my PowerPoint into Ledger itself so we can get started with all these different transaction types. So the first thing we want to do, you can just log into your Ledger account. This is our test account, so you might see a few things in there where the numbers might not seem right. That's okay. It's just meant to be used for testing purposes. So one thing I'd like to point out just from this main screen is that there's a running balance of all your transactions no matter where you are. And it always tells you the type of transaction in this first column here. So that should be pretty useful. We have a couple more trainings coming up on reports either next week or the week after. So if you want to know how to just see certain transaction types, I definitely encourage you to attend that reports training and you'll learn more about that. But today we're going to just focus on creating new transaction types. So to do that, you click on this new transaction button from any screen. And one thing I really like about the software is whether you're on this home screen, whether you're on the income screen, whether you're in settings, if my computer would load, or whether you're in reports, you can see this new transaction screen is always there. So you'll always know where to go to create a new transaction. So we're just going to go right in order here that's on the menu. So a first transaction type would be a transfer. So if you wanted to transfer, say, money from your checking account to your savings account for vice versa, that's probably the most common use, or maybe from income to income accounts. All you have to do is click on that transfer button, and you'll notice once you're in here, you can switch to different transaction types too. So if you would click transfer, you're like, oh, I really want to record a deposit, it's no worries, you can just go back and forth here. So for our memo today, like I was saying, the memo is on any screen. So for our memo, we'll just put transfer from checking, well, let's do from savings to checking. Maybe we were running a little bit low on our church checking account. We'll do the date of the transfer, and you can backdate these if you would like, but we'll do ours for today. And then you select your asset account. You can see here you have your unrestricted funds, and then all of these underneath are restricted funds from within my first checking account. So if I wanted to transfer money in my first checking account, oh, and it looks like I ran out of room here, so we'll just do checking. Say I want to transfer $100 from my checking to my savings. It would be that easy. Now, a couple things to notice here. As I was saying, the debits and credits automatically balance. You don't have to figure out, oh, I'm debiting this account and crediting this other account. It's just as simple as that. When you're entering the transaction, just think about where the money's coming from on the left side and where the money is going to. If I had mistakenly put $10 on one side and $100 on another side, you can see that this remaining $90 is left out of your transfer on the bottom account. If I would try to save, I would get this error message. And this is a very common error message in Ledger, so we'll just break it down really quickly. The transaction could not be created because line items must sum to 0. Expected credits total 10 equal to debits total 100. So you can do a few things from there. Either you could add another asset account down here, and then it would balance. And see, it lets me save right there. Or the other thing you could do is if it was a typo or something like that, you could, we'll get back to our 100 and our savings. Well, you could just put the other $90 back in here. So we'll do this from our unrestricted to our general fund. There you go. You'll see your transaction was created message, and you can always just click out of these whenever you want. I'll go back to our home screen, and it takes just a few minutes to load. So you can see all that deposit I just made, excuse me, thought I was doing a transfer. Your transfers you just made will be recorded right here in your home screen immediately, so you'll know right away it worked. This black lettering means that money was added, and then the red means that money was deducted. Oh, I'm going too fast here. And another thing you can do if you want to go back and see what happened there, you can just click on this transaction name. It'll take you back to the transfer. So a few things to notice here is this is a little bit different title here to signal to you this isn't a new transfer, you're editing your transfer. So if I wanted to go back in and edit it, it'd be as simple as that. I'm going to take this $10 off. I can see my debits and credits equal. And then you have an option in this transfer that's edited to add a second memo to let you know why your transaction was amended. So had a typo in first transaction and change, and you can do it just like that. So you can save this, and then once we go back, it'll have your transfer edited right here. That's it about transfers. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. The next thing we're going to get into is deposits. And just a few things to note here. We'll do this offering deposits. You can always select a date to say you actually made your offering deposit on Monday and you just didn't have time to record it on Ledger. You can select a payee if you want to. Payees really make more sense for checks and payments, but I know some people do use that payee field for deposits. Just think of it as a record of transactions with this customer rather than a memo made to them. But one of the most common things we get asked about is, can you split up your deposit into different funds? So say you had a $100 deposit. Let's do a $1,000 deposit from your offerings, but really that $1,000 sum you brought to the bank, you wanted to be splitted among different funds at your church. You can definitely do that in Ledger, so you just pick your general fund amount and say, I wanted this to be $500. And then Ledger will automatically calculate the remaining balance for you. So I will just add in our other funds here. Let's say we had all of these young adult youth funds. And if anything about these funds look unfamiliar to you, I definitely recommend you to check out our other trainings on YouTube. Those will tell you how to set up your funds. So I'm just going to keep going down the list here. Of course, you would do this with real numbers from your offering deposit. You can have this deposit slip mirror whatever you're bringing to the bank. So we can see our debits and credits equal out right here, and there's nothing left in the amount box. So that'll signal to you that you have nothing left to do, that your debits and credits match. If you wanted to make this a recurring deposit, maybe do a reminder to yourself every week that you needed to deposit your offerings, you could do that right here. So if it occurs every week on a Sunday or a Monday, you could definitely do that. I'm going to save it. And it says the recurring transaction was created. Now, I go to my recurring transactions. Hopefully our offering deposit is recorded here. So if I wanted to make this the offering deposit for the 8th or the 29th or the 5th, I would just go change the date in here and update my transaction. Now you don't have to split the line items up that way if you don't want to, but I know a lot of churches, you have different people giving different envelopes at different times, and that request to split up the deposit like we just did is definitely a very popular one. You can also split it between asset accounts on this side, although I'm not a huge fan of that because you would, if you're depositing to your checking and your savings in one trip to the bank, you would still have those two deposit slips. But that's really up to you and your church's accounting principles. We're not up here to give you advice. Just a little tip that I usually encourage people how they like to think of this screen. Okay. The next transaction type is payments. And again, if you remember from that first slide, we were on payments are used to record electronic payments made to vendors, not checks made to vendors. That's a different thing. So say I always like to use, let's say your church was paying for Sunday school curriculum. And they were paying for it online, so they didn't have a paper check they would write out. You would select a payee, and since we work at CTS, which is part of Concordia Publishing House, I'll select that. You can select any payees for your payments that you've set up in the payee screen. And then you're just going to select what asset the money is coming from and then what expense account it's or liability account it's being charged to. So let's have our Sunday school curriculum come from our education account. Say it's $300. So it would be from our education account, and then I have to go find my education or my Sunday school curriculum. Here we go, Sunday school curriculum expense account here. And it's up to you again how you want to name those accounts. Just know that it's coming from this restricted fund in your asset account, and it's being charged to the expense account for your Sunday school curriculum. Again, you also have this make recurring option if it's a recurring payment. Say you wanted to do it quarterly, like many churches purchase their curriculums quarterly, or any electronic payments. I know we have a couple in here that I'll get to in a few minutes that are set up to go monthly too. So you can just click Save, and then you can see my payment appeared right here on our home screen. It deducted $300 from our education. The next transaction type we'll talk about today is checks. And checks are those paper checks. One other cool way to signal to you if you're having a hard time remembering, do I do a check? Do I do a payment for this? The check screen will give you a preview of what your check should look like, so that's always another good reminder. So say we bought our Sunday school curriculum and we wanted to write a check to the grocery store to buy Sunday school food or snacks. So we'll write Sunday school snacks in here, and you can see as I'm typing in the memo field above, it auto-populates what your check memo field will look like. And we have different agreements with Forms Plus, which is a company that can provide checks for us too, and you can learn more about that on your website if you're wondering where do I buy checks that I can print from Ledger. Excuse me. Again, you would select your payee, so we'll say we bought these from the grocery store. You can include your check number here. We'll say our check number 200, and then we'll just go through our regular process. We'll say maybe food was $99, and then we'll go to, you can type in these boxes or scroll down. Sunday school supplies. You can see it automatically balances for you up here and down here. Now I'm going to do a couple of checks at a time. You'll see that when you create your check, you'll get this message that says your check was added to your print queue. We'll go there in just a minute, but I want to do a couple checks at a time just to show you that you don't have to print all your checks at once. So say we bought our Sunday school snacks and we bought our Sunday school crafts. Who should we buy these from? Let's say this time we wrote a check to CPH for our crafts, and this was check 201, and then we were taking it from our education fund. Say this was $100, and we were doing Sunday school supplies again, Then I'm going to save this. Whenever you're done recording your batch of checks, you have your option to go to your print queue. And this ties a bit into what I was saying before about when to use printed checks, those two circumstances. So if you use handwritten checks and you don't print off checks from your computer, what you would do once you're in the print queue is you would just select all these checks and you would click on this Mark as Printed button. As soon as you do that, your checks will disappear from the print queue and it means your checks have been finalized. If, however, you want to print your checks from Ledger, you would also select them and then just hit this print column. And a preview will appear and you're able to hit, this print button right here. You can say that your check number, total expenses, deductions, net total, any payee information appears. This is kind of like your check stub. And here's your actual check. The style of your check is determined over here in settings. You can see we have a middle check style, so that's why the check stub was in the middle there. If I try and save this and go to top for check style, I think my print preview will update that for me. It might take a few minutes. Yeah, it'll take a few minutes. But you can see that these all appear in the order you printed them. Since I don't have a printer on my webinar computer, I'm going to mark these as printed, and you'll see it will tell me the checks have been removed from the print queue. As soon as I do this, you can see that that little alert notification that was right up here disappeared. So it'll always let you know if you have checks waiting to be printed or if you have nothing left to be printed. So that's another nice little feature with checks. The next thing we're going to do is journal entries, and I'm going to get my debits and credits started back out here just so I don't mess anything up. So journal entries are ways you can record things like interest payments or other types of payments that are outside of the norm. And I'm not an accountant, I'll be really upfront about that, so I don't know a whole bunch about journal entries, but this option definitely is available for those who use it and need it regularly. So we'll just put our interest payment here. And then you can see that where it was saying the from to boxes are not in here because this is meant to give you a little bit more flexibility. So let's say we wanted to increase our first checking account by, I don't know, 10 bucks. It'll let you know down here if this isn't balanced. And we'll say that was coming from, I don't know, or federal income tax. Not that that would happen, right? We'll just do tax payment. As soon as you come in here, you would click save, and then the transaction's created, and it's listed as a journal entry here in your balance. Those are the main types of transactions if you want to start from scratch. And I went a little of myself going through recurring transactions, but there's a few other transaction types I'd like to go through, especially as it relates to our other software, Church360 Members. So let me get Members up on the screen here. From what I've seen, most people using our Ledger software do use Church360 Members as well. And so this will be a very important part of the training for those of you that are on both programs. If you're not on both programs, just hold on for a minute and then we'll get back to the things only Ledger covers in a minute. So one of the nice features about the Church360 suite is that if you enter offerings in Members, they come over to Ledger automatically. And I want to show you now just how quickly that works and how easily that works in case that's one of your main tasks on the week. So you should know if you're a Members customer, you're going to create a new offerings batch. And we aren't going to have time today to put a whole offerings batch in, but we'll just say we had $105 in loose offerings this week at church. So I'm going to press enter to add that offering. Okay, and you can see that my transaction is saved here. Just about as soon as it's saved, you might need to refresh, so wait a couple minutes. That transaction is going to appear in Ledger, You can see I went from 4 to 5 in my pending transactions. And pending transactions are always here. Your pending transactions are a combination of your imported transactions from members and your recurring transactions. But this is the one we wanted to focus on because you can see I gave $105 here through members, and just about instantaneously that $105 shows up here. You can see here's our little members icon, so you know that that's how the transaction came over from members. And then I can just write my offerings to general fund. I'll take it from my checking account and put it into my general fund income account. I can save. So simple as that. You can do that as many times as you want. If you want the integration to work between members and ledger, I can always do it with a new batch too. So it's just that simple. If anybody has questions about that, just put it in the chat and we can definitely answer that afterwards. I also wanted to show you, I know we showed you your recurring transactions over here, and that's where you edit the recurring transactions. The reminders come in this pending transactions, so you can see I had these 4 pending transactions which were set to occur on September 1st, which I haven't done yet. So to make them finalized, you'll just click on the transaction you want to finalize, and you'll edit your memo probably usually. So this is for September. You can edit the date. If it's a check, we could put the check number in here, and then you save your transactions. And again, because it was a check, it was added to my print queue. You can see my print queue number went up, but my pending checks number went down. I'll just show you again how this works. Again, these are recurring transactions that appeared in my pending transactions because they were set to be due again. So I'll just change my memo. The date changed for me automatically. I'll do check 503. I'll scroll down and hit save. So that's really nice. If you know you have bills that come up once a month or twice a month or once a year, you can always add those in recurring transactions. You can see it. You can do it any date or any combination of dates, and then you can edit it when that transaction actually comes as you wish. So just one thing to be aware of, if you create a recurring transaction, don't be afraid that the thing you enter the first time, the amount and the memo are set in stone. Really just think of it as a reminder for those recurring things that happen in your church or your congregation. We talked about imported transactions from members. There's also imported transactions from those of you that use Paychex. You can import a Paychex file for payroll, and then your list of imports will be right here. Go back to your home screen. Just want to show 2 more things, voided transactions and copied transactions, and then we'll be right about at 1:30. So to void a transaction, I'm going to void this journal entry because I know that I did not calculate that right. All you have to do is click on the transaction name. You'll see it'll take me to that transaction. Again, I'm editing it. You just have to press this void button. It'll let you know a transaction was voiding. And then in the main screen, there'll be this little no sign that appears letting you know that it was voided and on which date it was voided. And then it'll gray out to this lighter gray color to signal to you that your transaction had been voided. The other thing you can do is you can copy transactions. So if you know you set up something right, you can just click on the transaction name you want to copy, click on copy, and there's a nice message here. It says you're creating a copy of a check. So maybe I had Sunday School Crafts for Q2, and I wanted it to be about the same as my Q1. I just wanted to change the check number, and maybe this quarter I only had to spend $95 in Sunday School Crafts. I could do that from that copy of the original check. You would click Save, and then my new Sunday School Crafts check will appear in my main screen. This little sign here just lets me know that it's been unprinted, and again I can resolve that by going to my print queue, and I'm just going to mark all of these as printed. Those were the main things I wanted to show you guys today. It looks like it's about 1:30. I'm going to switch back over to my PowerPoint, and while I'm doing that, if there are any lingering questions, you're definitely welcome to ask them in the chat. But we do want to be respectful of our time here. So again, we went through all those things in Ledger. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to check out our Church360 Ledger.blog. You can see the web address there. We post them there as often as we have product updates, or when all of these webinar recordings are done, we'll post on 3 Fridays. We'll have our webinar recordings posted on the blog. That's the best place to keep in touch with us about product updates. We do intermittently send emails, but that's not always for sure. So definitely subscribe to our blog. I'd also encourage you to check out the Help system, which is in-app, or you can go to this web address, 360ledger.zendesk.com. Any help articles are found in there. Those are written by our support techs, who you can also call on the phone. Both the Ledger help articles and the blog are free resources to you. If you are one of those people that really needs a paper copy of things, we have our Ledger manual. It's available for $25 plus shipping. You can order it from the website below, but again, this is paid versus those other resources are free. So really, the manual is for people who really just want that paper copy. We've tried to make as many free resources available to you as possible. Here's my contact information again for those of you who may have missed it at the beginning of this session. I also put our software email and phone number on there. You can call them anytime during normal business hours during the week, and they're happy to help you with things. A lot of them can go way more in depth than even I could, so we encourage you to contact them anytime you have questions. They are paid as part of your support contract with us, so it's not an extra charge to call. With that, I'm just going to leave a couple minutes for questions and answers. I don't see any right now. I'll hang on for maybe 30 more seconds. But I'd like to just thank you all for attending today. And again, check out our YouTube channel and our blog if you'd like to see a recording of this webinar, or if you'd like to share it with someone at your congregation who hasn't been able to join us today. Looks like no more questions, so I'm going to sign off here. Thanks again, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.